commented. All right, and we're back. I'm going to take a quick sip of my Gentleman Jack to clean my palate here. Man, that I don't know if it's after tasting that Death by Coconut or if it's the cigar or if it's
bitterness came out.
No, like it's fruity and sweet now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like
Okay.
way sweeter and way more like fruit forward.
Mm.
But I'm going to talk about my last selection here, which I need to finish this bottle off. Unfortunately, this is Brugal 1888.
Oh yeah.
And we had a little bit of this when we were in the DR a couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago, I guess. And we had what was it called? The Siglo de Oro, like the high-end rum from Brugal. Man, that was fantastic. But if you haven't watched our previous episodes, where I think this is the third or fourth time I've had this rum on, and it's as you can tell, it's getting kind of empty there. So I think it's about time to retire this bottle, by which I mean finish it and buy something else. If you're not familiar, there hasn't previously been a lot of information available about Brugal. They're a Dominican distillery, and they're as we found out in the DR, they're very popular in the Dominican. Like that's kind of
everybody loves it. That's the go-to.
If you go into any restaurant and you order a rum, you're going to get a Brugal. And that's kind of what they think of as the rum of the Dominican Republic, which I was surprised by. And there's not a lot of information available on this specific bottling other than it pays homage to their founding in 1888. What I do know is it is aged 8 years in bourbon barrels and then 6 years in sherry barrels. So it's 14 years old, and it has this wonderful dark color. Like
that's pretty.
It is dark, and it's got a little reddish hue from the sherry. And I picked it up on a whim, and I adore this rum. I've heard it marketed as, or I've heard it described as a rum for bourbon drinkers, which I kind of agree with. It's got, it's interesting because the sherry finish is way closer to like a Scotch. But the flavor of it with the sweetness and everything, it really tastes closer to a bourbon than a Scotch. And you don't get as much sherry influence as I would expect. But I'm going to take a couple sips, let you talk about your final pairing.
So I was just thinking about my final pairing, trying to figure out how I feel about it. It's a beer, so that's no surprise. And it's a double IPA, double dry hopped, I should say. So this is the. Oh, you're getting glare from my.
Oh, Sitmo.
Okay. The Sitmo from Shibin.
Before you describe it, does that mean it's dry hopped once with Citra and once with Mosaic?
Absolutely.
Oh, and now I see on the bottom of the label it says that.
Oh, does it? I didn't even read it.
Yeah, E equals MC squared, and the MC is Mosaic and Citra.
Yeah. Oh, I it's funny. I didn't even read that. I've had so many of these cans, and it's phenomenal. These guys are from Walcott. I think it's Walcott, right? Walcott, Connecticut. It is. Okay. Walcott, Connecticut. And they were established in 2012. And I should say this beer comes in at 8.3%. So this is a proper double IPA. Like this is the standard sessionable double IPA.
I was going to say,
yeah. For session
is barely a double, in my opinion.
I guess you're right, especially now with the market. The way the market's going every year.
I feel like it's not really a double until it hits 9.
9 plus.
And then a triple really starts at 11. Like, if you have a 10.5%, that's a double, man.
Yeah, the triple is about 11 for me, too. I feel like that's really the starting point for it. And so this does have Mosaic and does have Citra, but it also has something called the, and I've talked about this before, this is the 007, the Golden Hop from Idaho, and it was grown back in 2015. And it's kind of funky because it has these weird like Earl Grey flavors really zesty orange and tangerine, and it's pretty bitter. It's mostly used as a bittering hop. And that's the first thing that pops out of this beer, especially now that it's sat for, I guess it's 40 minutes now. It's sat and warmed up, and it tastes like tea, really like Earl Grey tea. And it's phenomenal. But these guys, I'm so impressed. I started getting into Shebeen recently. I just saw them in the store, picked them up on a whim, and they're really cool. And they've been producing some very interesting beers. They're actually known for their, I didn't know this, I just found this out. They're known for their cannoli beer.
Cannoli, eh?
Yeah, so
sounds like some stuff that I need to get into.
Let me tell you. So from 2012 to today, roughly to today, they've produced at least 1 million ounces of this cannoli beer, and they make it with like cream, nutmeg, cinnamon, vanilla, grains from Europe. And if you go there and you order it, they have variations of different, like it's the cannoli beer, but it's a cherry chocolate cordial or a chocolate orange variation of it, and they add sugar and powdered chocolate.
Wow. I was actually really
cool.
worried that you were going to say that they add cheese to it.
Oh, no.
You know, like,
no, but I mean, cheese would be cool.
Cannoli is cheese-based.
Oh, yeah.
Which works really well in a pastry. I feel like cheese would not work well in a beer.
I have yet to make a beer with cheese, but I think I'm on a mission now. I'm going to get me some Stilton, and I'm going to make a double dry hopped IPA with Stilton. Could be good.
I drink it, but it sounds awful.
You never know, man. But so these guys are cool. They do a lot of experimentation. They made a cucumber wasabi beer. They have this IPA. I haven't had it yet, but it sounds awesome. It's a New England IPA, and it's called Baby Seal's Dance Party. Yeah. And they have a Sean White IPA, which is a white IPA.
I'm trying to put together Baby Seal's Dance Party.
The label looks exactly what it sounds like.
I mean,
it's pretty wild.
So the thing that I'm picturing is that it's a club for seals, like a play on clubbing seals.
I think so. Yeah,
like
I think
seals
that's the whole
that
point.
Go clubbing.
Yeah. It's the reverse.
Any joke that involves seal clubbing, I enjoy.
I'll send you some stuff, man. But definitely, if you're on the East Coast, look out. They're really starting to build their distribution now. They're not available in too many places, but I feel like they're growing, and I'd love to see them in more places and maybe stretch out to the West Coast, because they make these days. You know, everybody makes an IPA these days. It's easy to get into the IPA business, but it's hard to stay in it. And I feel like these guys have some good product that would really put their name out there and keep it there.
Yeah, it's I mean, that's an interesting thing about IPAs. It's very easy to make an IPA that people will try.
Yeah.
It's very hard to make an IPA that people will buy 6-packs of and keep in their fridge.
And I feel like the consumer in general is now more aware of this thing called an IPA. Even lay people that are not necessarily beer folks, they know what an IPA is, and they have this expectation in their mind. So if you give that person a beer and you call it an IPA and they don't like it, you've pretty much lost that person as a customer now. It's tough. It's a proving ground. And I feel like where we are with IPAs today, like I said before, I think ciders are going to start making their way out as the new proving ground for brewers.
Interesting.
Possibly.
I can see that happening. So the Brugal,
I can smell it from here, man.
Yeah, it's very sweet for the cigar. And man, I just noticed it's like, I don't know if it'll focus, but it's got some serious legs. It's like that level of, actually, now that I think about it, when we got the glass of the Brugal Siglo, it's very similar.
Yeah.
Where you do the little, fancy swishing around thing. And then you sit there and you're like, wow, that's got no legs at all.
And then they show up.
After like 15 seconds, it finally starts to drip. And it's like, oh no, it didn't have no legs. It had just coated the entire glass and stayed there.
It's impressive.
So it's got like a really, it's very sweet, but then you really get some of that like vanilla and smoke from the bourbon barrels with a little bit of that kind of fruity sweetness from the sherry barrels.
I love sherry additions. I think it's such a nice way to round out the flavor.
Yeah, yeah. Really, rounding it out is the perfect way to put it. Sherry really rounds out the flavor of a whiskey. It doesn't add like an
Yeah, it doesn't
overly
take away
sweet element,
necessarily.
but it adds a little more complexity to the sweetness part of it. Um, and I find it's actually really bringing out that grapefruity sweetness that I was
Mm.
talking about before in the cigar.
I think my final pairing, unfortunately, is going to have to go the way of your Death by Coconut.
Yeah,
Sadly,
which is,
it's too bitter.
I mean, the Death by Coconut is particularly sad because I absolutely love this beer.
Yeah.
It just doesn't go with the cigar at all.
Mine just has this like really intense, not even a bitterness. I realize it's the flavor of the hops, but I wouldn't call it a hop forward bitterness. If I gave this to somebody and they didn't know what it was, their first thing would be to say, "Wow, this tastes like overbrewed Earl Grey tea." And that's not to say badly anything bad about the beer, because the beer itself is killer. Just with the cigar, the Earl Grey flavors and some of the zest really just kind of doesn't play too well with the cigar, and takes away from a lot of the flavors.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's time for us to take our last break. But of course, as eagle-eyed viewers know who have been watching for a long time, we don't go anywhere for this break. Who is this break brought to us by, Dennis?
This break is brought to us by Drew Estate. They good.
Mm. So Drew Estate. So on, I think it was funny because last Thursday we did a News of the Week edition of Cigar Chat where Jason and I just kind of hang out, smoke a cigar, have a couple drinks, and talk about what's been going on in the world of cigars and answer some viewer questions. And Chico Ray, who's a longtime viewer of the show, he asked what we thought about the Liga Privada tins, and we talked about that a little bit. The very next morning, I got the email from Drew Estate,
Oh,
the
the
press
Cornets.
release, that they actually have shipped out. They're actually on shelves everywhere now. So Chico just kind of slipped in right before they told everybody that they were out there. Um, and I think it was on Saturday, I was watching the kids play outside, and I smoked one of those Liga 9 Cornets. Man, like there's so much more flavor than I expect to be in a 4x32, like little short filler guy. And if you can find those, go get them. They're going to be selling like hotcakes, I think.
And they're affordable as hell, man. I mean, 10, right? 10 to a tin, and
Mm-hmm.
MSRP is about 24, 25 bucks.
MSRP is $25.
25,
Chico said
yeah.
last week he like, so the day before they officially even launched them in the market. I mean, they'd actually launched them previously, as everybody knows, but blah, blah, blah. But before they had told everybody they were even available, which is typically when you're only going to get stuff for MSRP, Chico got a tin for $21.50.
Wow. That is a killer steal.
For 10 Liga 9s, that's a good deal. And they're going to last you. I was surprised by how long it lasted. I was saying last week how they're kind of quick smokes. It wasn't as quick as I remembered it. It was about
25,
25
30?
minutes.
Yeah.
Which is a good length for a cigar that costs you a little over $2.
And I bet the flavor is really on point too, right?
It is. So the thing that I have to warn people about, I feel like, with the flavor of those is it doesn't taste exactly like a Liga 9. Because it's short filler, you can't get that progression that you get in a normal Liga 9. But it's got all those core flavors and everything that your palate is kind of looking for with the Liga 9. Just the profile doesn't change through the thirds, which, I mean, for $2 cigar, I'm totally fine with that.
Dude, that's a kit for a Liga, period. That is a steal.
Yeah, exactly. They're good. Go get them.
I'm getting some after this weekend. I'm going out. I'm gonna find some. I hope I can find some.
You're gonna hunt some down?
Absolutely.
All right, so now taste my Brugal 1888 again. Man, it's such a complex rum. Like, it starts off with so much sweetness, and then it goes to like the kind of oakiness, the woodiness from the bourbon barrels, and then it finishes with like almost a spice. on the tongue, like a
Mm.
baking spice kind of flavor. It reminds me of like gingerbread cookies, kind of.
I vaguely remember I got some nutmeg notes on it.
Mm. Yeah, that's kind of one of those baking spice
Yeah.
notes that I'm talking about. I have a hard time placing the exact notes, but nutmeg is a perfect descriptor for what I'm calling baking spice.
And you're absolutely right too. That progression of different profiles for from first sip to finish on the palate is spot on. It is really complex. I mean, it's a rum, but it's a rum with some really serious body and personality to it.
Yeah, so as I've talked about before, um, growing up, I was never. I mean, I say growing up, but in the first 10 years of my drinking life, I I didn't consider rum my thing. I didn't like rum because I was used to like 4 year aged rum, kind of
Captain
two, three,
Morgan.
4 year aged rum. A dark rum is like Captain Morgan
Yeah.
or um, I'm trying to think what else. Like I
Sailor
had
Jerry.
actually had. Yeah, that's a good one. A good example, I mean. Um, the example that comes to mind is I was at a bar in the Caribbean, and um, just for people who aren't aware, I've been smoking cigars since uh, my like very early 20s, like since I think I was 20, maybe 21 when I started. And we went like on our honeymoon. We were in the Caribbean, um, so this was 8 years ago, and I ordered a Havana Club Dark, which was Havana Club 3. And I was like, yeah, I guess I just don't like rum. And it was because I was drinking rum that was meant to be mixed with Coke, uh, which I didn't know at the time. But now I know better. And like, this is the kind of rum that if you had given it to me then, I would have been like, this is the weirdest bourbon I've ever had. Because it doesn't have that profile
Yeah.
that I used to associate with rum. And so I guess what I'm saying is if you're like I was and you don't drink much rum, explore your horizons a little bit. I think you'll be impressed with what rum has to offer.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I was exactly the same way. Florida Cognac completely changed my
Yeah,
perspective on rum.
exactly. That's the one that changed it. Florida Cognac 7, which isn't, I mean, it's not an old rum. That's their version of a mixing rum, basically.
Yeah.
And Florida Cognac 7 knocks every other like rum in the $20 price point out of the water, in my opinion.
Oh, definitely, definitely, totally agreed on that.
And I've given it to people, and they've thought that it was a bourbon before, which is saying a lot. It's got a lot more complexity than you're probably used to. So if you haven't had it, go try some Florida Cognac 7. And I'm
And the
circling back.
Havana Club, absolutely too.
Yeah, the Havana Club 7 is the one that I would start with.
Though the Cuban, I guess we should clear
Yes,
that up. The Cuban,
no.
not the American Havana Club.
Yeah, they have Puerto Rican Havana Club on the market now. That is it's basically Bacardi,
Yeah.
and it's made to mimic the Havana Club 3 year, which is neither the light or the dark is that great. They're both. I mean, it actually says on the bottle that it's like something like mix this with cola for the perfect. What do they call it?
Puro Sabor.
No, what do they call that cocktail?
What, the
Havana
rum and Coke?
rum and coke. What do they call it?
Oh God, I don't remember.
I don't remember what it's called.
Oh, I don't order them, so I don't. It's not
Cuba
a thing that
Libre.
I. Cuba Libre, there it is.
It
Yep.
says on the bottle that it's perfect for a Cuba Libre, which is saying a lot. Like if you're saying on the bottle, mix this with something, you probably don't want to drink that straight. And I've had it
Actually,
straight, just all sugar. It's not great.
I had a lot of those in Cuba. Now that I'm going back to it, I had a lot of those in Cuba and mojitos, but that's pretty much it.
Well, yeah, I mean, so that's the thing is Havana Club 3 is perfect for. Thank you, Bob. Bob Langmaid. He had it in the comments. It just popped up because we're on there's kind of like a 15-second delay between us, and you're totally right, Bob. It was Cuba Libre. But those kind of rums are made for like a mojito or a Cuba Libre or something mixed, where you're getting the sweetness and the alcohol from the rum, but you're not getting any complexity from it. And Havana Club 7, if you're going for Havana Club, if you're traveling the world and you want to come home with a bottle of decent rum for $20, get Havana Club 7. We went on a tangent there. And Chico Ray's just checking in to say hey before the show.
Hey.
He didn't have a chance
What's
to watch
up, brother?
before. Thanks for watching, Chico. We appreciate it. We were just talking about you a couple minutes ago. Go back and watch to find out why. So I'm going to take a couple sips of my Gentleman Jack here. And before I do, actually, I'm noticing I'm kind of getting into, because of the size of the band, it's hard to call this the final third. It's really like halfway through the second third. The sweetness is starting to fall off. The leather and the earth are starting to pick up a little bit.
I've noticed that, and I've actually noticed, for me, the black pepper is really popping.
Yeah.
The pepper notes are really coming out.
It has a interesting difference between a lot of peppery cigars. Most cigars start off peppery, and then it slowly fades. This cigar, the pepper hasn't really let up. It's stayed pretty peppery.
And I like it. I mean, for me, I always love peppery cigars, whether it's pepper forward or pepper on the back end. In this case, man, I'm satisfied the whole way through. And I smoke pretty quick, but I'm kind of the very final little bit.
Yeah, you're a little bit into the final third.
Oh, I just realized too, the band. I don't know tell me what you think. So looking at the band, I get this like Firestone Walker essence with the colors.
I know what you mean. And now that I'm looking at it, I'm noticing the slightly different font in L-A. It's a slightly different size font.
It is.
Than Vencedora, which is interesting. And like I said before, I really like the silver, black, and kind of I don't know if the camera will pick it up. Yeah, it's picking it up. So when it focuses here, eventually, I really like the gunmetal kind of background on the Villiger portion of the band.
It's
there we go.
It feels very gentlemanly, which I guess for the pairing it makes sense. Gentleman Jack with a gentlemanly cigar. I'll go with that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have been sleeping on Villiger for a couple of years because they didn't have as many new offerings they didn't have a single new offering in the last few years, except with the exception of 2017. And I think the combination of having the Florida Inklin and then the Vencedora, they're on the right track here.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. So I wanted to bring up another fun fact about Jack Daniels. I didn't know this. I just found this out too. I thought it was pretty cool. So Jack Daniels comes from it's sold in a dry county.
Oh yeah, I didn't put that in my notes because I know that off the top of my head and I forgot to mention it.
Which is crazy, right? Considering the amount of warehouses that they have, but
I know they have. Well, I don't understand the math behind this, but from an article that I was reading said that they have 87 warehouses with 1 million gallons each, equaling almost 1 billion gallons. Which, if my math is correct, that's about 87 million gallons, which is not even close to 1 billion. So I think whoever wrote that
underground layers. Could be, but I mean, it sounds like a lot. It is a lot for sure.
Either way, they've got a ton of whiskey there.
So, Dry County, Lynchburg, Moore County. And the weird thing is, technically, they can't sell alcohol. But when you go there, if you visit, I haven't been, but if you visit, you can buy a commemorative bottle. Commemorative. Just the bottle. You're only paying for the bottle, technically. But it just happens to be filled. So...
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
It's such a weird
thing. I haven't been there either, but that's what I've heard is that you can buy a bottle there, that you're buying the bottle, not the contents of the bottle. The contents of the bottle they're not legally allowed to sell you, but unfortunately, they can't find any bottles that don't have that contents in them.
This is
So
like
they're
when I
allowed to sell it.
order whiskey from the UK or overseas in general. For the customs thing,
Yeah.
I always say collector's glassware. That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Eh,
And
it
so
might fill.
another really interesting thing about them being in a dry county, in the last couple of years, I think it might have been 2015 or 2016, they actually got some sort of license that was a legal exclusion where they're not allowed to sell you any whiskey legally. They can sell you a commemorative bottle that unfortunately is filled to the brim with whiskey.
Unfortunately.
But they have some sort of legal exclusion where they're actually allowed to sell you tastings. So they're allowed to do like a tasting as part of a tour.
That's like a Jersey thing. Jersey breweries are the same way. You can go and you can taste. You can't get a full pint. Not really. Some places you can. But generally, you can only do like little tastings.
Mm-hmm.
But they have to give you a tour first. At least in Jersey. That's the whole thing.
It's funny because like in Oregon, it's so the opposite. Like they'll give you a tour, but only if you really want it. But they'll sell you a beer, no problem.
I don't mind the tours. I love seeing everybody's setup. I think it's so cool.
So a really cool thing. This is completely off topic, but it came up naturally, so I have to talk about it. So the Rogue Brewery, which I've expressed my dislike for Rogue before.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page there.
I mean, they make mediocre beer and they don't treat their people all that well, from what I've heard. And
it's kind of pricey.
Oh, they're very pricey. I've had less than great service from the restaurants and stuff. But at their main brewery, which is in Newport, Oregon, it's on the coast of Oregon. It's really nice. It's kind of on the edge of this tiny little bay. Like it's a little bay, and then there's a bridge that crosses, and they're right under the bridge. You have to walk between kettles to get to the restaurant, which is really cool.
Oh,
like
nice.
they've got fermenters and kettles all over the place, and you have to walk through the brewery, and they've got like a little, like a police line kind of like velvet rope thing just leading you to where to go. But it's cool that you have to walk through the brewery to get to the restaurant. Not only does it have like that feel of I'm not supposed to be here, because it kind of is like I could just turn this dial and all your beer will fall out onto the floor. But it smells fantastic in there. It's pretty cool.
I'm surprised by how many people are out there that love beer that have no idea what it smells like when it's being made, and that are really surprised by the smell of it.
And here, if you're having lunch at this place with your kids, you know what beer smells like when it's being made. It's pretty cool. We got a couple of comments here. One from Matt Ross that I'm not going to read because it's got dirty words in it.
Oh no!
But he wants to know when he can be a guest on SOP again. We'll have you on in a couple of weeks. How about that?
Let's make it happen.
Yeah, we'll do a beer pairing. Chico Ray wants to know what we think about the Barn Smokers, and if either of us will be at the one in Pennsylvania. So I'm trying to figure out. I really want to make it to one of the Barn Smokers this year. I made it to the Connecticut Barn Smoker last year. I grew up in Connecticut, and I happened to be there the weekend for something completely unrelated. And it was like, why don't I stay an extra day and go to the Barn Smoker? So I did. This year, I'm trying to figure out which one is going to work the best for me. I really want to go to the Florida Barn Smoker, but I don't know if I can make that one work because that one's coming up real quick.
Come to Pennsylvania, man. Let's do it. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, I may or may not be at the Pennsylvania or Connecticut Barn Smoker, and if I do, I'm sure Dennis will be there.
Oh, I want to make it out to Pennsylvania. Absolutely, that's my goal. So I'll probably be there.
The Pennsylvania one's the new one, which I think would be really cool to see where
it could be fun.
Where Pennsylvania broadleaf is grown in Lancaster. And Matt Ross says Connecticut Barn Smoker is the best. Connecticut Barn Smoker was a blast. It's a little different than I expected it to be. Like it's more of a giant herf that happens to have a bunch of activities involving cigars. because it's really just hanging out with a bunch of people and meeting people and smoking cigars. But then they have like those. It's pretty cool. I mean, for the way to explain it to somebody like Dennis, who's been on Cigar Safari, is it's a mini Cigar Safari. It's Cigar Safari in like 3 hours. So they have stations set up, so you go and you learn about the tobacco seeds, and then you learn about the, what do they call them when they plant them? The seedlings.
Oh, the
and
little
then
seedlings.
You learn about how they grow in the field and how they cultivate the field, and then you learn about how they cure it in the curing barn and everything. So it's cool because it's that whole half a day that we do on Cigar Safari, but condensed a little bit. And I mean, and another cool thing is the people who are explaining each station. You've got Pedro at a station, you've got Willie Herrera at a station, you've got JD at a station, and then you've got the people who actually run the farm doing a station. It was really cool. If I'm not sure which ones are sold out and which ones aren't. They're probably all sold out by now. But if they're not, and you haven't been, and there's one within driving distance of you, you should go. I don't know what the cost of all of them is. I think the cost is about $90 each. Some of them may differ.
I think so, yeah.
I know the Connecticut one is $90. You get way more than $90 worth of cigars, and then you get to go hang out with a bunch of cool people.
Awesome people, absolutely. Willie, JD, man, Pedro, great people, and they will talk your ear off for hours if you let them, which is awesome.
True.
Anything you want to know about tobacco, about cigars, about the process, they will tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Very accessible.
And Matt Ross says he might be going to the Pennsylvania Smoker.
We'll go together with Carpool, man. Let's do it.
Yeah, the barn smokers are a blast, man. I'm really hoping I can make it out to one. The problem is, like, you know, for me it turns into a whole like getting a hotel and getting flights, and it's a long way for me to go.
Well, I live in Jersey, you know.
I'm going to try to.
Saying.
Still, you can drive. If I could drive 9 hours and go to one of them, I'd be there. But the problem is, I have to fly for 6 hours. You know, maybe somewhere around $1,000. It ends up being a whole
it's not cheap. It's not cheap. You're right.
But back to our pairings. We've gotten way off track here, talking, answering these hooligans in the chat or in the comments, answering their questions.
What's your favorite pairing tonight?
I think it was actually the Gentleman Jack. I think they kind of nailed it.
Really? Okay.
It's got that little bit of funk on the finish, but I feel like the sweetness of it and the I'm looking at the bottle and I don't want to say it, but the mellowness of it, like how it's very friendly.
It's a very subdued friendly Jack Daniels.
Yeah, it's like if you had regular Jack Daniels and you took a sip and then it gave you a hug. It's just like a gentler version of Jack Daniels.
It is gentle. You're right. I'm struggling. Jack Daniels from the very beginning was on point with this cigar, and I finished mine already, but if I had some more, guaranteed it would fit really well with the final third of the cigar. But at the same time, I have to say this cider I think it's going to be my winner for tonight. The Lost Tropic from Graft. The grapefruit notes are just killer, and they balance the cigar so well without taking away from the cigar. And for me, that's a killer pairing.
Yeah. And I should mention my other pairings at least. The Death by Coconut. I adore this beer. It is not the right choice for this cigar. It's the sweetness overpowers the cigar entirely. And because it's weird because the cigar is fairly strong flavored, and the cigar covers up a lot of the fruity flavors of the beer, like the coconut and the chocolatey flavor. You end up just getting hops and hops and pure sugar from the beer. And then the 1888, I feel like it's overrunning the cigar just a little bit. I feel like that's the problem with it, is that it's not that it's a bad pairing, it's that it's kind of a strength mismatch. The cigar is not quite strong enough to stand up to the Brugal. And I should mention, tomorrow night we don't have a guest for Cigar Chat, so we're calling it off for now because we had news of the week last week. And our guest for last week our guest for next week rather fell through. So I'm working on rescheduling that, and there's a possibility we might have him on tomorrow, but I don't think so. I think it's going to be a couple weeks. So I'm looking for a last-minute guest for next week, so you guys don't have to go 2 weeks without a show. But I'll let you know what happens with that. Any other closing comments on the cigar or your pairings, Dennis?
I really like the cigar. Period. First
Me
one
too.
I've ever had. Really like it.
Yeah, I think this is a cigar that's begging for a group review because I think we're going to get some slightly varied opinions on it.
Definitely needs a group review.
So we'll work on that. We'll have that in a couple weeks, I'm sure. Thank you everybody for watching. Of course, thank you to all of our podcast listeners for listening. If you're watching out there on YouTube, we appreciate it. Give us a thumbs up, or I think there's still thumbs up, right? Subscribe, heart, subscribe, thumbs up, upvote, whatever the thing is. Do it. We appreciate it. Thank you for watching or listening. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode of Sharing Our Pairings. And remember, here at Sharing Our Pairings, we want you to drink better, but what do we want them to do, Dennis? And get it right.
We want you to drink less.
We want you to drink less.
Absolutely.